Well, thank you all for joining us. And I just wanted to start by introducing you to Bridgewater by saying that you, I think, are the most creative, friendly, wildly successful, down-to-earth person I know. And I'm so grateful that you decided to join us today, and really wanted to thank you. And I think those of people listening who know me seem to probably be saying, how on earth does Dave know anybody in Hollywood? He doesn't seem like a Hollywood guy. So I thought we might kick this off by just describing how we got to know each other. I don't know, I guess 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, so this is how Dave and I met. We didn't know each other at all, and we went to a conference. As we get there, Veronica and I, my wife, we get an envelope that says we're going to be living in a house with other people. And I thought, well, that was not what I expected. And we get to the house, it's dusk, and I see these two people, Dina Powell and David McCormick. And hi. And that's how we met, was that way. It was one of these very serendipitous moments, and we immediately connected. There was someone else that was in the house as well, but it was the four of us that really connected and became kind of a bond, and traveled a few places in the world together.
Yeah, no, we became the only thing I'd add to that story is I had just read Brian's book, A Curious Mind. And so we walk in, and I'm saying to Dina, no, I've just read this book. This book's incredible. I can't believe we're with Brian. And so I had, I was really excited to talk to you about that. And we had a great number of great conversations. But then the most bizarre thing of all was that I met Brian's wife, Veronica, and we start chit-chatting. And I find out she grew up in the same tiny town in Pennsylvania that I grew up in. And she was a couple years behind me, and my mom and dad and her mom and dad knew one another. And so we had Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania in common too, which who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Because who even knows where Bloomsburg is?
Not you, because you've never been there.
Exactly. Very good. But it was really it was serendipitous in many ways. Yeah, that was awesome. I loved that.
It really was. Well, Brian, everybody, when you look at your career, the question that comes to mind, and I've heard versions of this, but how on earth did you get started? Because at a relatively early age, you were off with these huge hits like Splash, and really made a name for yourself early on by both producing great movies, but also finding great talent. And I wondered if you might just take a minute on how it all got started.
Sure. Okay. So I like many of us, you don't know what you're going to do when you get out of college, or you don't know what you're leading towards when you're in college. So because I was in that sort of state of mind, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to USC. I guess I'll try to get into USC Law School. So I get into USC Law School, and it's the summer that precedes what would be law school, and I have to get a job because I don't have any real money, and I don't actually believe that even if I start law school, I'll pass the bar. I don't really believe. But I just had to pick a lane. So I'm in my apartment complex, first week out of summer, into summer, and I overhear these three guys talking, and they were all three USC Law School grads, and one of them started saying, I just had the easiest job I've ever had in my life, and the other guy says, really? And so at that point, easiest job, I thought, I'm going to really listen into this. And so I actually opened the window fully so I could completely eavesdrop, and close the drape so I can conceal myself. And I hear one guy who used the word cushy. It was so cushy. I thought, what a word. That word's for me. And anyway, so they say it was Warner Brothers Legal Affairs, and they say the name Peter Connect. That's all I got. They walk away. I get the number of Warner Brothers Studios, which was 843-6000, and ask for the legal department. I get the legal department and I just say, oh, can you please give me Mr. Connect's office? I get to that. I said, I understand you might be needing a law clerk. I'm very highly qualified. I just got out of graduate college. And that day I got the cushy job. So now I've got the cushy job at Warner Brothers immediately. That was on a Friday, so Monday I start. And the cushy job was literally, I was working out of a tiny office with no window. It was like a prison cell, really. It was very small, and I had nothing to do. It was cushy and boring. And then the next week, a full week passes, and somebody comes in and says, your boss wants you to deliver these papers. Because that was essentially what a law clerk does do. They file and they deliver papers and things of that nature. So I get the papers, and they're about this thick, and it was what was going to be the movie Heaven Can Wait, and the papers would be delivered to the biggest movie star in the world named Warren Beatty. So I'm thinking, okay, I got a company car. I'm driving from Burbank to Beverly Hills. I get to the Beverly Wilshire Hotel where, the eligible bachelor Warren Beatty lived, on the penthouse. And I have the papers, and somebody is there to receive me. And I say, oh, I have to hand these papers to Mr. Beatty. And they say, well, no, I work for Mr. Beatty. Just hand me the papers. And I just think to say, oh, no, I have to hand them directly to Mr. Beatty himself. And the guy says, no, you don't. Just give me the papers. So another person comes down, and I say, look, I can easily leave right now because these papers are deemed unauthorized unless I hand them directly to Mr. Beatty. I'm sorry. I was 22 and a half years old. All of a sudden, I'm looking at Mr. Warren Beatty on the penthouse. They take me up, and I think to create a conversation immediately. Like, I can't just hand him the paper. I realize I have to create a conversation. So I turn this transaction that would be a second into 1 hour with espressos and sitting down in his living room. And I thought, wow, when I left, I thought this was mind-blowing. Not only was it enjoyable, but I learned so much in this 1 hour. So I thought, I'm going to institute this as a policy for Brian Grazer. Anytime I have to deliver papers, I'm going to insist on a meeting. Barbara Streisand, then there was the biggest agent in the world named Sue Mingers. There was endless amounts of people. Then I thought, okay, I'm sorry to take this a very long time, but I'll get through it. So then I think to myself, I could do this without having to deliver papers. I can write a list, because I'm starting to learn the vocabulary, because all businesses are about demystifying the vocabulary, understanding the vocabulary. So then you could understand, I think for me, theoretically, where the leverage lies. And when you know where the leverage lies, then you know your value or non-value. So basically, I start now every day calling a new person that was very important, like making a difference in the entertainment business. Chairmen of studios, master Oscar-winning directors, I could name them all, on and on and on. I tell my boss, Peter Connect, I'm going to stay. I decided I'm going to push law school back for 1 year. I want to stay for the next year. And so it was a win-win, I think. And so every day I would meet a new person. The one that made the most biggest difference was Lou Wasserman. And Lou Wasserman was a co-founder of MCA Universal and was really the patriarch of all entertainment in that time, and really the most memorable character in all of the media business. And I think I do everything. This is what I always did too, if this is important. Process, I knew, was everything. I would be so charming and so kind and so coddling with all assistants, clerks, anyone that led to Lou Wasserman, anyone that led to Robert Evans, Francis Coppola. And that was the bridge, is like just really, really be present, be sensitive to everyone that orbits these people. Now I get to meet Lou Wasserman, and instead of, the minute he saw me, he could tell I really didn't have anything to add. So he put his hands up and he said, whoa, hold on the 15th floor of the MCA tower. And he said, just wait there, kid. He goes into his office. He comes back with a pad, a legal tab, one of those yellow tablets, and a pencil. And he said, hold these. He put one in my left hand, one in my right hand. And he said, now put the pencil to the paper, and it has greater value than it did as separate parts. Now get out of here. So that was it. That was my meeting. But it was the greatest experience I had in my life, because I realized that he could tell, I didn't have a movie star. I didn't have a script. I didn't have anything. And the only way to have something for a kid that had nothing was to manufacture and create ideas. And that's what you do with the pencil when you touch the paper. And that's sort of how I began.
I love it. And what was the first big break? What was the first, manifestation of the pencil and the paper coming together for you?
The first manifestation was I used to write a new idea every couple of days. The first was I got in a meeting with the chairman of NBC. It was a woman named Deanne Barkley was the first one. And Deanne Barkley was a woman that was the most powerful woman in show business. And I got this, what would be a short meeting, and Deanne, and I had two ideas I was going to pitch for TV series. And I get in her office and I'm pitching, and I'm really always look at people. And I feel, it's connecting. Behind her is a bird cage with a bird, because her office was designed to be New Orleans. She was a New Orleans lady. And she's loving my two ideas and shaking her head, yes, let's do it. Which would have been a great ending. Instead, there's a thump. Her bird dies right behind her. It dies, fall in the cage. And I'm staring at her like, is she going to cry? What's going to happen? What emotion is going to emerge? And she starts with a long pause. She begins to laugh and say, this is, meant to be. And she bought my ideas at that moment, and that began the beginning. And I produced some movies for television. Was my first. One was a 20-hour miniseries on the 10 Commandments, modern. And the other one was called Zuma Beach, the day in the life, 24 hours of Zuma Beach.
And
that was the beginning.
Was the first big movie Splash?
The first big movie was Splash, yes. So basically I produced these movies for TV. And so at 25, I was already a real producer. And I knew I wasn't like a guy that could conform to a system. I became, in my first moment of self-actualization, realized because I got a job. What happened? Those movies for TV propelled me into becoming president of. I got a job to be president of Paramount Television. Was a huge job. And in 2 weeks, I realized I don't like having power over people. I don't enjoy it. It's not for me. I like to have power over Brian. So I thought, how do I do that? So I quit that job and became a producer on that lot. And I wrote the movie Splash, and I wrote the story to Night Shift, and Splash was my salvation. Yeah, The Man and a Mermaid and Tom Hanks.
Wow. There's so many people that you've kind of discovered, Tom Hanks being one of them. But one of the currents throughout much of your career was your partnership with Ron Howard. And, as it said in something I read, there's not many partnerships of any kind in Hollywood that have lasted as long as you and Ron have lasted.
None.
Tell us about that, and how do you play off of each other in terms of your strengths, and why has that worked?
Well, I met Ron when I was on the Paramount lot as a producer, and I just every day continued this discipline of meeting a new person every day. When I, even when I was just a independent producer, I met Ron. He came into my office reluctantly, and because he's quite shy, and I felt like I saw there was an aura around him, kind of a aura of goodness. And so I had no idea if he could direct anything. I just knew he had something special and good about him. And that that meant a lot to me. I mean, it meant the thing to me, in fact. And the way it began is I had these two ideas that I'd written, Night Shift and Splash. He didn't want to do the mermaid movie first. He wanted to do the other movie, which was more irreverent. But basically the way so we made two films together. And in two films, which is like 5 years almost, 19, yeah. You really learn a lot about somebody, and because you're in a foxhole, like you are tested. Because the first movie, the chairman of the studio wanted to fire Ron Howard. I saved him. I never told him I saved him, but he goes, "You saved me. They were going to fire me," and that really meant a lot to him. I think we realized after this 4.5 years that we accessed on certain 3 principles: trust, the similar sense of taste, like what qualitatively is tasteful, we agreed on, and value system. So basically, value system relates to work ethic. So if you and I were partners, Dave, and we said we get along and everything, and a hard day of work for you was 12 hours, and we're partners, and a hard day of work for me is 6, that's not going to make either one of us happy. It's not going to work. Yeah. So both of our sense of our work ethics were very much in alignment. But basically after that, we live entirely different lives. So right at the center of that heartbeat are those things, but he's an inside guy and I'm an outside guy. I'm a prospector and creator of ideas, and I teach a class, in fact, a master's class at USC, starting from 0. I'm very good at that. He's very good when I've prospected the hole to drill in the hole with great concentration every day for a year.
Yeah.
That's sort of how it works.
It's crazy complimentary. Let's talk about your ideas because I wanted to tie that, if I could, to your curiosity conversations, because one of the things that I always have admired so much about you is you're constantly looking to learn and grow and evolve. Like, you're very unsettled in terms of where you are at the moment. You always are want to see and learn more. And the systematic, curiosity conversations that you described, I guess initially with Warren Beatty, have carried throughout your whole career. Talk a little bit about that, and then if you would, we talked about that funny one, the curiosity conversation with Fidel Castro. I'd love to ask you to share that with the group.
Sure. And then you can move me along if I'm going too slow. So basically I've stayed with this for 35 years, where every 2 weeks I meet somebody that's expert or renowned other than entertainment. So it could be science, medicine, politics, religion, all art forms, technology, of course. And so I do that, and I do it because it disrupts my comfort zone, because I have to learn quickly about physics, or the other day about T cells, because I met Jim Abramson, who won the Nobel Prize in 2019 on re-engineering, knowing how to turn a T cell to attack cancer. So won the Nobel. So I want to always be a good date for the person I'm interviewing. That's my goal. As we've all had our very, very best date with a man or a woman, and where all time is lost. And both people are winning out of it. It's almost becomes a biochemical event. And you get to a stage where you don't think about anything other than this moment with Dave right now. And it's kind of beautiful, but it only can happen if you're not obstructed by language and clumsy conversation. So those things were, very valuable to me, and I learned a lot. I mean, a lot of my life, intellectual and emotional, have been gained by these conversations. It creates an understanding of our deeper understanding about compassion and humanity itself, because you realize we're all sort of motivated for the same thing. And it's built a lot of movies for me, and it's made me a lot of money, actually, just by being curious, because you see and feel other perspectives that I think benefit all businesses. So it's a thing that I find to be very rich. So now I'm in Cuba. I get to go to Cuba, and I go with 6 other guys, and I think to myself, well, it was just like 15 years ago, and Fidel was pretty healthy. I'm thinking, we're here. We got to meet Fidel Castro somehow. And we had people following us. We had people that were following us and people that were spying on us. We had the whole thing happening. Anyway, we get a meeting with Fidel Castro. First, there's no meeting. They go like this, because they don't say his name. They say, the meeting is ready. And we say, what? And they go like this. That means Fidel. And that would have been 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 2 o'clock when we were tapped on the shoulder at 3 o'clock. At 2:30, they say it's off. So, okay, now we're up. We can't, no go. Our planes, we have private planes. We're leaving the next day. In the morning, we get the call. Fidel would like to have lunch with you. It starts at 12 p.m. I think it was all just to enhance the story, the mystique of this guy. And so now we get, it was really Godfather-like, all the thing. And then we're going to one location, which was a farmhouse. We literally did what they did in The Godfather with Sonny and they do a big U-turn and all the cars go to the military palace where Fidel will be. So now we're going to the military palace. We get there and he holds a drink in it like this for 45 minutes, doesn't touch it to his lips. I'm thinking this is going to go on forever. I know that anyway, we end up having lunch, go from that to lunch, which was 6 hours. And two things happened. He never asked one question. I don't even think he took a breath. And after 3.5, almost 4 hours, he looks at the 7 of us and he points to me and he says, how do you do your hair? That was his question. I think he's was so obsessed with iconography. So when he did that, I thought, well, I have the freedom to do something that I've been doing for 20 years. I leave these very kitschy pictures everywhere. Bill Gates's bathroom, Bezos, everybody. So I left this in the military palace. Let me see if I got that. Nope.
No, we didn't see it. We didn't see it. Yeah, it's a picture of you in a heart frame.
Yeah, it's very kitschy in this little rhinestone frame that costs under $2, about $1.90, and I snuck it onto a bookcase in the military palace in the room we were eating at right when we were leaving, and so Dave thought that was kind of funny, but I felt like I had to do it. I had to leave something.
That's Brian leaving his mark.
Yeah, it is. Now, if I go to somebody's house, yeah, so that's what I do. Yeah. So I left that in the military palace.
I love it. And you've had such success over so many different genres, TV and movies and so forth. And of course, won the Oscar for A Beautiful Mind, which was an incredible movie. But there's a great story you told me, which I always liked because it was a humbling story about another time where you were nominated for the Oscar but didn't get it.
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us that?
So basically, yeah, it's on Apollo 13. So what happened is I produced the movie Apollo 13, and basically it began with a 12-page outline that I was immediately captivated to buy, and then turn it into a script, and then said to Ron Howard, because I don't give him everything because I've worked with Clint Eastwood, I've worked with 70 other directors or 50 others, and I say, you want to direct it? He says, yes. He says, but they found, that everyone in the audience everyone knows that they survived. I go, but it's going to be, we can make it thrilling. We can make it compelling. We can turn it into a thriller. And we then have a list of actors, because the studio wants us to pick Tom Cruise or Kevin Costner, one of these big names. So we're all ready to pick one of these big action stars. And it occurred to me, what's the most important thing? I thought to myself, the most important thing is for the audience. Who does the audience want to save the most in the world? Tom Hanks, who wasn't on the list. That's whose heart that people could get engaged with, even if they knew the ending. So now we make the movie with Tom Hanks, and it exceeds all of our expectations, becomes very successful, makes a lot of money, makes, and now all of a sudden we get nominated for 9 Oscars. So now everyone is saying, "Oh, Apollo 13 is going to win. It's 20 years of this. It collides with this 20-year anniversary of the space program, NASA, blah blah blah." And so it looks like we are going to win. We're there at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion for the Oscars, and Sidney Poitier was the one that was going to open that final envelope of who will win. And again, we were winning Oscars throughout the night, but the coveted Oscar itself is Best Picture. So I'm sitting in the 5th row on the aisle, and you got Hanks in there, and you got Ron Howard, and you even had Jim Lovell. So basically, I'm positive I'm going to win. I'm so positive. I've written a speech. I've gone over it. I'm ready to say it. It's on a card like this, and I pull it out a couple times. I'm ready to go, and I'm looking at Sidney Poitier with the envelope, and he is a very deliberate speaker. Slow, deliberate, anxiety-provoking. And he's got the envelope in his hand, and he's ripping it open, and he pulls out the card. And I'm so convinced I'm going to win, so convinced, that when his lip, there was an imperceptible, what I thought was a B on his lip, like a B for Brian. I got up, and cameras have me getting up to accept the Oscar. I walked towards the stage in front of 40 million people, in front of all of my peers, to get the Oscar that I think, but he says, instead of Brian, he says Braveheart. So this is just horrible, like the worst, most embarrassing public humiliation. So I start walking backwards to retreat because I didn't win. And I'm looking around like this. It's all in slow motion. It's horrible. I turn so I don't fall down backwards. I turn around and I see a chairman of a studio go, "Loser," to me. So this is even worse. I finally sit down, and I'm watching Mel Gibson, get the Oscar, and it's so terrible. Jim Lovell is sitting. There's Ron Howard, there's Tom Hanks, and the actual astronaut, Jim Lovell, the astronaut that had the failed mission that Tom Hanks played. He reaches right over Ron and Tom and grabs my wrist like this and says, "I never made it to the moon either." So I thought, well, all right, that puts things in perspective. He actually got up in that. He was actually in the rocket, in this. So that was pretty embarrassing. It started off good, but then it ended.
It's
me
ended
taking
up okay.
Sleeping pills. Yeah.
It's ended up okay. We've talked about this just recently, but with the George Floyd killing and all the discussion in the country about racial injustice, I had made the point, and we had talked about the fact that, you really stand out in Hollywood as someone who has really been at the leading edge of African Americans playing significant parts, finding a lot of the key talent from Halle Berry to many others, as well as really promoting and producing primarily African American movies.
Yes.
And I wondered if you might talk a little bit about how you how you've had that track record, and then also whatever reflections on the moment, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of evolution in Hollywood on the issue of race, but also I'm sure lots of continued challenges.
Well, so when I went to USC, my very best friend was a black athlete that was a superstar. And when he graduated USC, he won 2 Most Valuable Player awards. His name was Lynn Swann, who was a receiver, wide receiver.
Pittsburgh
Yeah,
Steeler. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when I started being a young producer, Lynn and I stayed friends. We're still friends, honestly. And I would pitch him ideas. He'd say, "What you working on?" Like almost like you would say, "What are you working on?" Tell him things. And often they could be with Black artists. And I didn't really think about it much, but one day he said, you know, Black people can do romance too. They don't have to just do action films. And it was very unlike him to it's kind of it's somewhat confrontational, but deeply truthful. I think the roles that I was thinking about were more action oriented. And he basically said that Black people love family too. You can do that. You can, Black people can do many things other than just the things you're thinking about. So it really struck me, and it opened up my aperture completely. And then I started, I got to know early on also Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor actually helped me get to know Eddie Murphy, because Eddie Murphy was just on the rise. He had just done Raw, which I went to his concert at the Universal Amphitheater. And Eddie Murphy was at a time in his life where he was a star from Beverly Hills Cop, but he was kind of trapped in a bad contract at Paramount. And he needed someone to trust, and he kind of felt that he could trust me. And then we together collaborated on a movie called Boomerang, which isn't an action movie at all. It started Martin Lawrence's career, Chris Rock, I'm sorry. A lot of great actors were in this movie Boomerang, and in fact, it's a huge, huge cult classic. And that just began. I saw the world much more differently, the racial world differently, and I also had to champion prejudice because, I started making these movies and television shows even as recent as, of course, Empire or the Wu-Tang Clan. And there really is a prejudice, like studios would say yes, and then they'd realize, it was a Black actor, and then they'd say, well, let us think about it. Oh, International doesn't want to do it. So I just became, I felt like, first of all, a lot of the actresses I wanted to work with that were really talented were in fact Black, because I just picked the best people, and they often were like Eddie Murphy's or Martin or Dave Chappelle and stuff like that. I could go on, but I'm just very aware of it. So for 30 years, I've been making movies and television shows and documentaries that involve Black artists. In fact, one day with Morgan Freeman, it was 30 years ago or longer, I said, I took him to lunch. I said, African American. He said, don't you call me African American. He got very, up mad about it. He said, just call me Black. I am Black, call me Black. So it's just like there's so much to learn, really. There's so much to learn and to evolve our perspectives about racial prejudice and just about racial boundaries and all the stuff that's going on that was very activated with the George Floyd murder.
Yeah, I had asked you at one point, what you thought your kind of unique skill was, or what was your special thing, and one of the things you mentioned was an ability to identify the talent, an ability to identify that special thing, whether it's Tom Hanks or Denzel Washington, these people that were really nowhere in their career, and then through those initial relationships with you that got them started. What is the thing you see? What's the sparkle? Like, how do you describe it? How do you know that this person has it and that person doesn't have it?
If you feel the easiest thing is if you feel a direct line to their heart. But what that really means, though, on a deeper level, is do you feel like their voice, the thing that it could be the way they dress. It could be, it's usually what they say, you know, a story. If you feel like it's authentic and original, like someone is actually saying or doing something that you hadn't thought of and expressing it in a way that gets my interest. I mean, if I feel, there are so many writers that have come into my office, and the executive that works for me says, oh my God, they wrote this, they did that, and they have these very high credentials. But if they use a lot of generic phrases, or I just can't do it. I just say, no, I don't feel it. Because when they start boxing things up in oh, this movie's like this movie, or this movie's like that, they do it, they create comparative analysis as opposed to finding a word that is going to be interesting. I'm attracted to people that are interesting. And it sounds so general, but I also think special people are attracted to people that are special people, and they're usually interesting. Yeah. And I think I wouldn't have got Denzel or Russell or Tom Hanks so many times to do movies for me, because it's unbelievably competitive to get. But I think they felt like this dude, meaning me, knows something more than just generic phrases from Hollywood. You know, this guy, if I'm in a foxhole, he's got a lot of different little tools on his tool belt, little options, you know. Okay, we can't crawl under the barbed wire. Well, let's try this, you know. So I think they see that I'm resourceful and have enough knowledge about many different you know, walks of life, or narratives, or you know, just tools of resource.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Quite frankly, I know this won't make you, that's what attracts me to you. Your service in the military, your education at West Point, your understated quality but deep. I mean, I don't even know where it ends. I think you're so Black Ops.
That's right. You and my kids.
Yeah. But I think if I'm in a pickle, Dave there's a good chance I'm getting out with Dave.
Yeah. No, thanks for saying that. You know, one of the things you were asking about was the radical truth and radical transparency.
Yes.
Culture. And you know, that manifests itself in lots of different ways at Bridgewater, where, you know, we sort of have a contract with each other that everybody, if you're thinking it, you'll say it. And you kind of always know where you stand with people, and that you know, the bargain is that if people give you feedback, you sort of view that as a gift, because the feedback is like the kind of stimulus you need to get better. So it's like being in the gym and or being on an athletic field. If you're getting the coaching, here's what you need to do better, that helps you. That's sort of the essence of it. And one of the people asked in the chat room on how you process the feedback. So I mean, presumably throughout your career, you've had so many great successes, but I'm assuming you got negative feedback, negative reviews.
Yes.
How do you process it? How do you use negative feedback? How do you see negative feedback in terms of your ideas and your movies?
Well, I find that unsolicited negative feedback has been really valuable to me, and has changed my life and built it. Unfortunately, in my business, or maybe it's just me, I don't think it's just me, but I think any negative feedback that's not solicited in my world is motivated by something other than I'm just trying to help you. You know, I think it's often, I mean, early in my career, where I had several hundred people turn down Splash because it sounded really stupid, a mermaid movie. I didn't ask them to give me comments, but they always wanted to say, that's the dumbest idea. Oh, do something else. And I always kind of felt like, first of all, I didn't ask you, don't tell me. And I just thought it was to break down my energy. You know, like if they break down my energy, they won't have to see it someday and they won't be wrong. or any version of that. So I kind of went to, I go to that place. If I ask, then I really want to know.
Yeah.
And that might be you. I'm sure you have either rules like that in your culture, or you're picking people that are not malicious, or you're picking people that put team first, or I don't know the rule really. But because I said to you, like, how can you possibly do that without like hurting people's feelings and causing indelible injury upon somebody?
Yeah. Well, it's a balancing act, I think, in our case, where it requires really caring, thoughtful feedback on one side, and it requires an openness and a benefit of the doubt on the other side. So it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's people struggle with it, but it's, in its best form, it's really, just like you said, it's really valuable, really valuable.
Yeah.
There's a number of people who are also asking the question of, sort of the combination of the move to digital, the effect of the pandemic, so forth. How do you see the future of the movie industry, and how are you? I know you're evolving, Imagine, in a way to deal with some of those things. How do you see that future?
Well, I mean, I guess it feels like the inevitable digital future has arrived. Like everything being digital. I mean, storytelling is most effective when it's real people. So you can't just make people, although I think you can make people. You can take off heads and put them on bodies. You can do all that. We know that, in fact. We can, change the age of Michael Douglas. Instead of 70, he's 45. We can do things like that. I think people have to see people. That's what storytelling is. Great movies, great TV shows, great documentaries. Documentaries, I know that I told you this. We're, I think, the preeminent documentary company because I love documentaries, and I've been able to acquire a couple of companies that have great, like Alex Gibney, of great filmmakers attached to it. I mean, right now the COVID there's some studios. I have a movie with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who, of course, did Hamilton. We're starting up that pretty soon because Netflix is pretty systematized. They feel like they're possibly the most systematized in terms of how they've evolved, where people will work, how they'll live. They'll all live in one compound, then they'll be out. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. I think we're all in the media business, really nervous or leery of how do you make the machine work better so that it's not so vulnerable to this, to human possibilities like this, like a pandemic.
Yeah. Well, I had made the point to you when we were talking about it, that I had sort of said very confidently, yeah, I'm assuming that there's much more content these days, good content, because you have all these new distributions, Netflix, and all this variety of ways. And you said, no. That's not the case. Actually, there's not sufficiently good content out there, and that's what's missing. Say a little bit more about that, if you would.
Well, the other thing I'd say is, in relation to that, there is good content, but the ratio of good content to the magnitude of what's made, there's a great disparity in that.
Yeah.
So because of everything, a media company, in order to survive and compete, or compete and survive, they do have to be a streaming company. So companies that would never have imagined being a streaming company, might it be Disney, all of them, they all were very resentful of Netflix, and artists didn't believe in Netflix. Now Netflix really proved to have mastered this,
Yeah. We're running out of time, but
okay.
But I want to ask sort of a two-part question. Ask you to look back, and then ask you to look forward, and then I know you got to catch a plane to Croatia. So thank you for squeezing us in. Honestly, you're obviously a friend, so I but I really mean what I'm about to say. I think you just stand out as one of the great American storytellers. Really on so many different dimensions. How do you think about your legacy? I mean, you've sort of you've gotten every award you could get, but yet you seem to be, have an enormous energy. So I want you to look back and tell me what you hope the legacy of Brian will be. And then I'm going to ask you to finish by looking forward, because I know you're so excited about so many things, and tell me what you're most excited about in terms of all the things you have on your plate going forward.
Well, my legacy, I think I'd like it to be where people felt like I had good values, good character, and treated them well. that it's an intangible, but it's achievable. And I think I'm on course to achieve that to the relative degree I can. I like you will go out of my way to say hi to people. I believe in human validation. I like being validated, and I don't need to be praised, but I like to know that I exist. So I try to share that with everybody. And then as far as the professional legacy that interfaces with that, I want people to feel like, sure, I'd love it if they remembered, a couple of movies and a couple TV shows, but on whole, I want them to feel like, oh, this guy made quality stuff. He made high quality. And if you ask somebody, what does that mean? Normally means that I told a story that took them to a place that was aspirational. I want to send out good vibes. I don't want to create horror films. I either wanted to make people laugh, or I wanted to make people cry, like, joy.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to make people feel good, because I wanted to feel good. And when I saw E.T., it made me feel good. And there's other movies, around that time, which was early in my career, that actually I went into the theater one way, and emotionally I came at it in an entirely different way, with more peace of mind, more kindness to others. Ultimately, that's what I'd like.
That's a great legacy. And looking forward, I mean, why are you so excited?
Am I still doing it?
Yeah. And I mean, no, listen, every time I talk to you, you got a new project, you got a new idea, you're running 100 miles an hour. There'd be a lot of people at your point that would be kind of resting on the laurels, but I don't see that at all.
I think I just get so excited about creative puzzles, and I genuinely am curious. I mean, I was curious as a kid. Then I realized that's the way to learn. Then I realized that curiosity leads to the birth of new ideas, broader perspectives, and frankly, in a very competitive business, gave me a competitive advantage. My more curiosity, more than others, gave me a competitive advantage, not just in the stories, but in getting great artists to work with me. And so I like the puzzle solving, and I like certain things. I'm doing 6 hours on the New York Ballet. Wouldn't that be nice if that were great and everybody understood it? Look, I produced a documentary on Pavarotti. Who would think that could be that entertaining? But we proved he was the biggest pop rock star in the world, an opera singer. I mean, so I think I get excited by that. I get excited by those things.
Yeah, with good reason. Brian, thank you. Such a pleasure to have you, and have a great time in Croatia. And I know on behalf of all Bridgewater, we wanted to have this in person, as we talked about. So there's an open invitation. If you're on the East Coast, we'd love to have you come up for a visit, and just can't thank you enough.
Amazing. Thanks, Dave. And thanks to your Bridgewater team.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye, Veronica.